Hello and welcome to Creator Toolbox this morning on February 15th, Tuesday. We are excited to be here today, and we will go ahead and get started with some introductions. We'll start with the man who needs no introduction, but he's going to do it anyway, Chuck.
Why do people always say that?
Because it's true.
No, I'm sure there's somebody watching these videos for the first time who doesn't know me. My name is Chuck Tomasi. I am a senior developer advocate at ServiceNow. I've been with the company since 2010, back when there were just under 200 employees, and was a customer for a couple of years before that. I think I started when there were about 35 employees. My development and programming history goes way back into the early 1980s. So lots of stories to share, but we're not here to share my stories. We're here to hear from Earl.
Hi, everyone. I am Earl Duque, a developer advocate here at ServiceNow. I am just coming up on my 6 months being here with ServiceNow, but before that, I was with a bunch of universities before that. Been in the platform for about 4 years and still learning a lot of new things every time. Ashley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Snyder. I am an outbound product manager here at ServiceNow. I've been with ServiceNow for about a month, but I've been working on the platform for customers and partners for about 6 years. And I'm on the team that deals with UI Builder and Next Experience. So all the really fun stuff that we'll be talking about today.
And my name is Brad Tilton, and I'm a senior developer advocate here with the developer program at ServiceNow. I've been building on the platform for 13 and a half years. My kids like to do half birthdays, so I think we're around half years there. And I've been with ServiceNow for a little over 5. I'm excited about today's show. Again, Creator Toolbox is our show where we give you the tools you need to build things on our platform. And today I am excited to get into what's new with UI Builder a little bit more. Before we get into that, we are in the second week of our San Diego season here at the Dev Program. We are going to be releasing video and blog content every week, a couple of live shows, blog content, and then the Breakpoint podcast every other week. And so all of that can be found at devlink.sn/San Diego. You can see what we're going to be doing for the next 2 weeks in terms of live shows, and you can access all of the content that has to do with the San Diego release. Also, you may notice the little San Diego, we'll call it the little data pill up at the top right. We're going to put those on all the shows that we're doing so that you know this is a San Diego themed episode. And so that's our San Diego content, and we're going to get into on this show what is new with UI Builder in San Diego. There's a bunch of cool stuff. We have Ashley here who's going to kind of walk us through some of that and do some demoing on what we have. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ashley. Ashley, thanks for being here, and let's see what we have.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. So before I get started on kind of jumping into UI Builder, I did want to go ahead and just do some housekeeping on terminology, because I know we have some terminology changes coming out in San Diego. So the first term I want to go ahead and discuss is the Next Experience UI framework. That's just our renaming for the Now Experience UI framework. So, you may see some videos or some documentation out there that still says Now Experience. Just know that's the same thing as Next Experience when you hear that. We have the Next Experience UI, which we did a Creator Toolbox on last week, and I believe is up and viewable. And that's just the new UI that we released in San Diego to tie the platform and core UI together with workspace experiences and just make that easier for users to navigate both. And the final thing is UI Builder, which we're looking at right now. Some folks may have experience with UI Builder, they may not. But the UI Builder is just a web interface that we use to create pages and configure pages within Workspace and Portal and custom experiences. So today I'll go ahead and start with the layout enhancements that we made in San Diego. So we do have a new layout system What it does is provides better performance and it simplifies page customization. I'll jump over to kind of what the old layout looks like in just a moment. But as you can see already on the page itself, I have some new options. So the new layout system uses Flexbox and grid layouts, and you can really kind of configure both of those layouts without having to use a lot of code. In the previous layout system, you'd actually have to go in and code within one of those two options. It was just a lot more involved, a lot more difficult to kind of get a complex layout for your landing pages or whatever pages that you needed to configure. Just a quick note on the layout systems. So Flexbox is really great if you have kind of like a simplified layout. Let's say that you have like a single row or a single column. Flexbox works really well for that. Let's say that you have a layout that needs to use a mixture of like columns and rows and just a little bit more complex. Grid's going to be your method for doing that. And if you see over here, we actually have links to both of those. If you want to learn Flexbox or you want to learn Grid, all you have to do is click on this and it takes you over to the product documentation and gives you some more information on what those layouts are and some information on when you would want to use them. So we've built that right into UI Builder. We also have a simplified content tree and a styling panel for layout configuration. So over here in our content tree, you can see that in my page, I'm using a grid layout, but within some containers itself, I have a mixture of flex and grid layouts, and it tells me right here which one I'm using, which I think is pretty handy. Kind of takes some of the guesswork out of knowing which one I'm using for what. We also have a built-in upgrade wizard to convert old layouts to new layouts for existing and custom pages. But do be aware, anything that you've created, any newly created page variants will use the new layout system if you're on San Diego. So let me just go ahead and walk through a quick demo of the layout features that we have here, and then I'll show you guys the older layout. So I am in UI Builder here. I just have a simple page that I created for this. I created a grid layout. You can see here, I went ahead and just set it to one column and two rows. And I put some containers in there as well. So for my first container, I just used a simple flex layout. Just have one row. I put a header in there. For the next row, I went ahead and used a grid layout, and I have 4 columns in one row. And all I had to do was just type this in. Like I said, in the past, you would have had to go into code, configure this. It was just a lot more difficult to get those complex layouts. This took me just a couple of minutes to really get set up, which was really nice. As far as kind of working with layouts in the styles tab here, I mentioned we can learn about flex and grid. I can set my spacing, my columns, my rows. I can even go in here and align items, align content, and justify all of it right here. And set things such as width and height within the layout system itself. Let me pop over to, I have my PDI here, and I've created some things in Rome before I upgraded it to San Diego. And as you can see, I am using the older layout system, which is still supported in San Diego. We're not making folks, convert their old layouts right away. We're not forcing them to convert as soon as they upgrade to San Diego. You can still use the old layout system. We just recommend that you use Flexbox or Grid when you're doing that to make it more easily convertible in the future. I can tell I'm on the older layout system because I have an update layout button right here. And when I click it, I can actually see there's the upgrade wizard that's kind of telling me about the new layout system, what it's going to give me, and let me know that I can go ahead and upgrade this when I'm ready. I'm not going to do it right now, but all I'd have to do is click update. When doing this, I suggest, just like any other kind of update and upgrade validation, go through your pages, make sure everything kind of transferred over the way you want it, make any adjustments as needed. I definitely wouldn't do this like in production right away. So it just goes through your normal development and promotion process.
I've done this
Ashley,
on a few.
what's happening behind the scenes when they do an update layout?
That's a good question. To my knowledge, as far as that upgrade wizard, it's probably looking at all the slots right here. It's So we have the slots, it's collapsing those and just converting them over into the new layout.
Is it introspecting the CSS at all and trying to make sense of that, or leaving that alone?
So the CSS, I believe it's leaving that alone. It's just taking a look at the containers and the layout itself.
Okay.
We'll get into the CSS enhancements that we made in just a moment.
Yeah, I've done this with a few pages so far and haven't really noticed any big differences. The cool thing about once you do the update layout is you have the chance to look at the new version of your page and the old version of your page before you tell it whether you want to keep the layout. So that's a nice thing. You hit update and then it's like, why don't you compare the versions, make sure everything looks okay, and if so, you can keep the new version or you can revert back.
Yeah.
Genius.
To answer you, Chuck, it's probably going through this edit layout code right here. It's probably going through this code and taking a look to see what you have and kind of like filling in the gaps from there. I don't know 100% technically. I know I can find out, but that's kind of my guess there. So you can see there is some differences in the old layout system over here in my styles panel. I don't have all the options to set, rows or, set different kind of heights and adjustments. I do have some standard options here, but I just don't have that full set of options that I have with the new layout system. And one thing that I'll go ahead and get to is I don't have a lot of the styling options that I would have with the new layout system that I'm going to get to. The old system in Rome and Quebec, you really had to set your CSS styling, manually by code for a lot of things regarding containers. So that's the biggest thing that you're going to notice is this usability over here on your configuration panel. So getting into the styling enhancements, that's another thing that came with the layout system. Like I mentioned, you have to be on the new layout system to see these sections here and the styling enhancements. So what we've done is we've exposed a lot of the CSS code that you'd have to write manually. And we've exposed that in the configuration panel and just created sections for developers just to do this without having to enter in that code. So we do have, styling sections for alignment. You have your margin, your padding, your background, border, and shadow. Those are all exposed, and a lot of them use like default values, and most of them will accept theme variables. So if you have a theme applied to your experience, you can actually go in and use those same theme variables without having to hard code them in. So one I really like, so I'll go up to my heading container here. Let's just say I wanted to set the background. I can actually go in and I see what theme I'm using. So I have Next Experience UI turned on, and I'm just using the default theme that comes shipped with that. Let's say that my theme was using a lot of blues and stuff. This would actually change over and show all those blues and everything that I was using. And I can go in right from here and just choose which theme variable I want to use for coloring on that. I think that's really nice as far as like not having to put in CSS and do that. I could just go in and just do everything just with a couple of clicks.
Yeah, this is so cool because then you can just come in and change the theme and your colors automatically change in your page. And so I think we had the ability to use theme variables in Rome, I think, right? But
yeah,
we didn't have this picker. So you just had to know what the name of the theme variable was, which is not very practical. So this picker is really cool.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier. And so you can see here too, will say I don't want to use theme colors. I have an easy palette. I can go over here and throw in a hex code or use a different color if I wanted to, all without having to really go through and write out that CSS.
I like that color palette.
Yeah. Let's say that you like writing CSS. Let's say that you have some and you just prefer to use it rather than, the sections here. You can actually click this View and Edit CSS toggle. It will bring up the CSS behind the scenes. So you can see it is showing that color that I chose. Anything that I add here will add to the sections. Anything I add in the sections will add here. So you can kind of go through that CSS real quickly and see what you have configured. One thing I do want to mention, I think we touched base on this in live coding happy hour last week a little bit. With the sections, If you hit the plus symbol here, it is going to add that property. It is, I'd say, it's a little confusing because you think this is like a show and collapse kind of thing, but it is really meant for adding the property itself. And if you click the minus, it's not really meant for collapsing the section. It's going to remove that property. So that's just one thing I wanted to point out that might not be really apparent to developers right away. I've kind of done that a few times where I'm like, where's my stuff? I just collapsed the section and now everything's kind of reverted. So
Nice gotcha to know about.
yeah, that's definitely something to point out.
The nice thing is that it does, change the preview in the middle of the screen. So at least you kind of know, hey, something changed here.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to go through, save your page off, which I will,
Yeah.
and then open it to see those changes. You can see it automatically here on the stage.
San Diego is the season of us pressing the save button a lot more often.
Always press your save button.
I'm a consistent saver anyway.
All right, awesome. So yeah, I mean, there's more extensive information on the new layout system and in our styling on our product docs. We'll have more information coming out on our Center of Excellence. I encourage developers just to go into PDIs or sandbox instances and take a look and start playing around. A really good, complex example. Let me pop over there real quick. But I'd like to take a look at when I'm kind of like designing a page or just wondering how it works is the CSM landing page. So you can see we have like a pretty complex layout here. You can kind of click through and see how these things were designed. So definitely take a look at that. I've made a copy just to play around with. That's a really good template or kind of learning template to take a look at.
I think that's kind of been a theme. I mean, Brad, you and I, when we were trained back in old sysadmin school in 2008, that was a common theme. Look at the out-of-the-box examples for guidance, for best practices, usually, and make a copy of them and play around with them, see what happens. And if it doesn't work, you still have the stock one to fall back on.
Yeah, and I think that CSM landing page, I think, is an especially good one to look at. If there are other UIB experiences, especially if you enable, if you build an app from a template, a lot of those template apps have some experiences, but I think probably that CSM configurable workspace is maybe the best experience to copy from. Because it's still being updated. And, I think if you're going to go with one, look at that one first.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so the next thing we'll get into is JSON editor. I'm really excited about this one. I think a lot of developers are going to be excited about this one. So what the JSON editor does in San Diego, it basically provides a user-friendly interface to set like component properties that use JSON. So prior to the San Diego release, developers had to go in. There may be some like dummy JSON that we put in for examples, but they really had to kind of go in and know what the schema was and what properties they could use. If working with like a really complex array or object, it really wasn't that straightforward. And most of the time you had to go in and reference like product documentation to see what properties were even available. So the low-code JSON editor, it does support like simple objects, simple array properties, complex arrays, arrays of objects, and partially supports complex objects. For complex arrays, you can add, delete, or even move the position of array items. And the JSON editor displays all the available properties that a component property will use, even if they're not in the demo data, which I'll show you guys in just a second. So you can really kind of see what you have to configure and play around with, even if you didn't see it in the demo JSON that we shipped that component with. You can also update properties and add your own custom properties within the JSON editor itself. So I have two kind of simple examples here. The first thing I'll be working with is this alert. Let's take a look at this link label. So you can see that demo JSON that I was talking about. And like I mentioned in the past, this is really all you got to work with. This is really all we gave you. But if I click on edit now, you're going to see this is the JSON editor that you're working with. And we have 3 different kind of tabs and options to choose from. So here are the user-friendly properties. So I can see that I can set a label here, and I can set an href. Let's say that I'm used to working with raw JSON. I don't mind working with it. I'd rather use that instead. I do have the option to go in and edit it here. And also a really nice thing is I can see the schema that the JSON is using. So I can see it's an object. I can see I have 2 different properties, what they're expecting here as far as string. And I can see that all within the JSON editor itself.
Can I
Go ahead.
paste on the edit JSON tab? Can I paste pretty JSON and single line JSON?
That's a good question. I haven't tried that. I'd say you guys should try that out on Live Coding Happy Hour next week or this Friday and see.
I was going to say try it now. You're right. That feels like a live code thing.
I will mention if you change something here, so if I change this to like test, it will show up here in the raw JSON and vice versa. So you can work with either one and it'll show up. The next one I want to show is kind of more of a complex JSON schema. So I'm working with a simple drop-down component. And here I have the items JSON. And if I click edit in here, you can see now we're working with a bigger kind of schema here. I have an array of items. And I can actually go in here and set the items within the properties. Again, in the past, you'd have to go into the raw JSON and do it. But what you can see is that in the demo JSON, my raw JSON, I only see ID and label. Yet here in the properties, I see I actually have a few more properties that I can set. So like I mentioned, we have exposed those for you, even if they're not in the demo JSON that we ship. And in the past, you'd have to go into like you go into the developer site, you'd go into the component reference, you'd have to find the component, you'd have to go through all the setup, and here are all the properties. I can see that I have access to all these, but those were a couple of steps just to find that out. Whereas now I can see them right here and I can set them right here, which I think is really nice. If I'm working with like a larger array, I'd say this is kind of a big array, and I can actually hide unset items and show unset items. So I can collapse that down and just make it a little easier to work with. And another cool thing, which I was playing around with it, I didn't even know with the drop-down component, is that there's actually 2 different schemas that was available to me. So this first schema is just like a list of items within the drop-down, like item 1, 2, 3, and 4. But if I click this schema right here and change it over to schema 1, I can actually see I can have parent items and children items, which I just had no idea about with this particular component that was even an option. And now I can kind of go through and see the schema on that too. So I thought that was really cool how you can toggle back and forth right within the JSON editor itself.
Neat.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really helpful, especially if, even if you've been using JSON for a while, it's just going to cut down on time, expose some things that you may have had to go hunting for. But if you're new to JSON and you're trying to get through the UI builder and configure these components, I think this is going to be super helpful for folks who are learning JSON or are new to it. All right. No. So the last thing I'll show, and I know we touched base on this in the Live Coding Happy Hour a little bit last week, and I know you guys might play around with it some this week too, is the component formula editor. I think we were trying to show and hide different components based upon what was in that formula. So the component formula editor in UI Builder is used to bind or modify formulas within the configuration panel for a component. It does replace the binding type ahead found in previous versions, and you can use text, data bindings, or formulas within the editor, and it supports logical, arithmetic, comparison, negation, and functional transform types. I will go ahead and say this right off the bat before we even get into it. There is a document talking about the different supported functions that it uses. So definitely bookmark this and take a look at it when you're working with that or trying to learn it, or just even for reference when you're using it. We have a lot of different formulas that you can use. So what I've done is I've just created a simple stylized text component here. And how I want to set it up, basically, I have a client state parameter that I created called table name. I left it blank. And if there's nothing in that client state parameter, I want to say no table listed. So I have an if formula right here. So if at state.table name, my client state parameter, if there's nothing in that, if it's null, then go ahead and say no table listed in my text. If there is something, say table listed. Like I said, this is a pretty simple use case, but just so you can kind of see how that works. And what I've done is create this button. And what it's going to do is trigger an event called update table name. And I created a script here that's just going to set the table name to incident. So once I click that button, let me go ahead and just save this off and open it. It should put incident in that client state parameter, and per the formula editor, it should update that text for me. I'll give that just a moment to load. Cool. So no table listed. Let's click update, and now I can see there's a table listed. In the past, to me, I would have to trigger some event or do something there or bind the client state parameter to that stylized text itself. And I just think this is a really easy way to, update this text or update something within the formula. And I'm sure we're going to have way more complex use cases, and you guys probably are going to have use cases on live coding happy hour that are way beyond this example. But I just wanted to show that.
Well, I could see a simple use case for that being if no records were found, you could put up a message that says, hey, there's no records found, rather than a blank list.
Yeah. And I put this stylized text here just so you guys can see when you go in to work with it. If you click on data binding, now you're going to see all these different values here. So all these little kind of purple cubes are the formulas that you can use. And like I said, we have all on our documentation. And then we should have, if you're working with data, I don't know why it's not showing right now, but your data will show here too, like at state, at context, at data. They'll be in blue as well. So it's all mixed in, just so you kind of know when you start to go in and do these data bindings, what you're looking at. So I've covered some of the new features in UI Builder at a really high level. We're definitely going to have product documentation on these, probably some more webinars on these, and more information on our next Center of Excellence on the community. My opinion, I really like the new layout and styling. I think it's going to be super helpful. I know in the past when I was trying to create pages, that took me a little extra time just to get past that hump before I even started doing data and events. And I think it's just going to make things a lot more efficient and user-friendly. So I'll open up for any final thoughts from you guys and any Q&A that we might have.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's some great stuff in there.
Yeah, it's nice to see this maturing to the point where I can actually use it now.
That hour went by really quickly too. Oh, no, half hour.
Let's see. Do we have questions coming up? Morale said, I think it shows up if you type at. I was going to say, I think the data shows up once you get your if in there, but don't count on me.
Yeah, it should show. I was playing around with it. I've kind of been setting this up, but it should show up right here. So right, the context, data, state.
There you go.
Like you said, you type at, I guess this is a rectangle and some brackets. I don't know, just so you know, kind of know what those different like icons are.
It looks like a brick.
Someone's been playing too many games.
Paige had a question earlier, but I think Brad answered it in chat if we want to go back.
Yeah, I think it was while we were looking at the JSON editor. It was if, what does it look like if you're pulling in data from a data source? And I think at that point, you wouldn't be using the JSON editor. It would just be, you just have your data from the data source into the component. So I think that's a good question around, if you're binding data directly to like a JSON property, then your JSON that you're binding from your data resource has to be the right format already. You can't like do any formatting between, the data resource and the property.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know I haven't tried that out. I think we kind of got into that a little bit on Live Coding Happy Hour with the component formula editor, as far as like doing those conditional statements and wanting to have null in the JSON. I don't know. I'll leave that for you guys for Live Coding Happy Hour to explore that.
Any other questions?
Anything you might know, Ashley, that might be coming up?
What, as far as like new features or what?
Yeah, roadmap stuff.
This is what I'm on right now. I'm living in San Diego world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we got a good question in the chat. Put that up there, Earl. Is there any feature to show Google Map in UI Builder?
Show Google Map in UI Builder.
That sounds like a custom component at that point.
I think that is a custom component at this point. I don't. So basically, that's a good question. I mean, the question is basically like, how do you do something in UI Builder? And the answer is usually we have a component that does that, or you need to build your own component to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't think we have a map component.
Yeah, I know we have some new components coming out.
I would hope there'd be something, because you'd think facilities would get on board with the workspace soon.
I know we have some coming out, but I don't remember exactly which ones. I have to go through and find. I don't remember seeing it on there.
Okay.
That's the fun part of the same sentiment as Service Portal, though, right? We provide a bunch of widgets that should help you with a bunch of things, but if you can't, then make it yourself, and that's the power of the tool.
Ooh, there is a Google Map widget. Yeah. Or a component.
Is there?
Yeah. Field service Google Map, I think.
Field service. There you go, Chuck.
Oh, so it's in the field service?
I believe so.
Okay. Yeah. So that, if it's in field service, to me, you'd have to actually have that plugin on. Because I know that field service management kind of ties into the customer service management workspace a little bit. As far as like the new components, we have platform-wide that are, available to anyone, independent of having a plugin on or, a license or subscription. We do have some new ones here that we're releasing in the San Diego release.
And if you want to find a component, you can go to developer.servicenow.com, click on reference and click on components, and it will show you all of the components that are available in what we call the component playground. And
ever growing.
There is a field service Google Map component in there.
Eventually, one of our Hacktoberfests will be nothing but building components.
I'd like to see that. That'd be a really good one. The playground's super useful too. Like I was kind of exploring creating components. And let's say you want to embed components in your component. Let's say you want to embed a button or something. And you can actually use the playground to set some basic configuration and properties and just copy that code over into your editor. So that makes it super easy. That's a really good use case for the playground.
Good stuff. Any announcements today?
For me, San Diego EA is live on your PDIs. We're going to have more documentation up by the GA release. I am working on it in the background. I can't wait to just kind of put all this and make it all live in the GA release. But definitely go in, upgrade to San Diego, play around with UI Builder and the new features in your PDI, and take a look at Next Experience UI as well and see how that kind of interfaces between what you're doing in UI Builder and the platform UI.
We've got another live coding happy hour coming up on Friday. More UI Builder stuff. And then next week, we're going to turn to Flow Designer. So we've got a Creator Toolbox on Tuesday and a live coding happy hour on Friday. Tuesday, we're going to be showing off the flow diagrammer and saving flows as a template. And then Friday will be about error handling, the new tribe logic that we've got. So looking forward to that. Hope you can join us for that. It's all published. The schedule and links to the upcoming events are on the link at the bottom of the screen, devlink.sn/San Diego. Thank you, Earl. We had a Breakpoint last Wednesday released on the 9th, Breakpoint podcast for developers, talking to Andrew Barnes about kind of an overview of get his thoughts on the new San Diego features. And then next Wednesday, would that be the 23rd? I can't remember anymore. I think it's the 23rd. We're going to be talking to Brian Bimschlager about Flow Designer. So yeah, you're just going to get all kinds of blog and podcast and videos about Flow Designer next week.
All right.
Well, did I miss anything? Any other announcements coming up?
I don't think so. All right. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Ashley, for being here and showing us around UI Builder. And yeah, we will see everybody on Friday for live coding happy hour. Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye. Roll the music.